Hey there, let's talk about it. Hello everyone, welcome back to Busi Entertainment. So in this video, we will be taking a close look at the South African legendary film Tsotsi and how the film changed the South African movie game. Tsotsi was a groundbreaking film that set the standard for the South African movie industry. Tsotsi introduced a change in how African lives were portrayed in film, where black people were once viewed as primitive. Tsotsi portrayed them as advanced individuals with the ability to coexist in society the same way as people of other races and creeds do. Where Africans were shown to be one thing, Tsotsi showed them as dynamic individuals who are able to have businesses and live in the suburbs. Where Africans were shown to be barbaric, Tsotsi shows them in true light, like any other human being capable of violence, hence Tsotsi, capable of empathy, and capable of love. Let's take a deep dive into how this game changer Oscar-winning film came to be and what makes it an impeccable film. This movie is drawn from a book by Athol Fugard by the title Tsotsi. So Athol started writing this book rather in the 60s, and it was only first published in 1980. So the setting in the novel is the 1950s Sophia town. So the movie Tsotsi was directed and produced by Gavin Hood, who thought that this was a beautiful story of redemption and that the world needed to see it. So what made Tsotsi the winning film we know? How is it different to other films created at the same time or before it? Number one obvious fact about Tsotsi's success is the impeccable cast in the film. Gavin Hood took a gamble by selecting new actors and actresses to play or to portray the main characters, and these actors and actresses we've never seen in South African movies and film productions before Tsotsi. So let's pause a little and just admire the greats that this movie gave us. So the first one is Persley. Persley plays the character of Tsotsi, and literally this movie catapulted his success, and we now know him as Cobra in the Mzansi Magic series The River. Persley is a really great actor, and his acting does not need any defending. It is literally a standard. The second person is Terry Peto. So Terry, unlike a lot of the other actors that we've seen in the film, a step back like towards the background after the production of Tsotsi. So Terry Peto portrayed the character impeccably, and we connected with her emotionally and as a character as well. The third one is Motusi Magano. So this is one of the best, transformations we probably have seen in South African acting, or in South African films. He started out in Tsotsi as, this not nerdy, but like this shy guy who doesn't speak much, who is very emotional and doesn't like violence, but he's caught up in the web of violent friends and violent company, and yeah, he goes from portraying a timid character to now being one of South Africa's best villains. Like, if you can think of South African film and TV show villains, this guy must be in your list. This guy has given us like the most chills in some of the characters that he's played. So shout out to the film Tsotsi for actually bringing these people to our view. So the last person I want to mention is Zenzo Ngobe. So this guy, literally after the release of Tsotsi, he played, huge characters on TV. We saw him on Rhythm City, and he literally ate up each and every role that he played. So shout out to Tsotsi for giving us, these talented actors and actresses that I've just mentioned. There's so many more that I wish I would mention, but those ones, a lot of them are, they were already established or they had already started acting on TV. So for the purpose of keeping this video short, I just mentioned the new actors and actresses that, Tsotsi gave us. Number 2. So the second reason why Tsotsi was this huge groundbreaking film is the music selection. In the film, you can see a whole lot of South African popular music back then being played, throughout the movie. And one of the people I want to mention, or one of the artists I want to mention, is Zola 7. His music is key to this film because the music that Zola produced at the time when this film was released, it spoke a lot about, what happens Kokasi, what happens in the location, what happens in the townships. So the movie, Zola's music and the movie married perfectly well. So the music selection made this a great hit. Number 3, the post-apartheid life representation. So a lot of films that were released at this point were mostly about apartheid, and Tsotsi was the first film that portrayed life in the post-apartheid South Africa. Thinking cap moment. The movie beautifully portrays the realities of institutional racism and how economically apartheid was still alive and well in South Africa, regardless of whether or not the system was still in power. So this portrayal is visible in how townships were black people areas and suburbs were white areas with only a handful of black people. We can also see the economic oppression in how, in broad daylight, the streets of the township location are filled with people. This hints to the rate of unemployment post-apartheid. And I mean, there was unemployment even during apartheid, but the only difference now is that people are not fighting, for liberation. Whereas back then, unemployment wasn't a huge thing that phases people. Just as long as you have one person working in the house, the rest were fighting for liberation. So this movie gives us a glimpse of, the unemployment of, in South Africa, and a lot of which, or most of which, is very prominent in the townships. So we see all this unemployment while taverns are filled to the brim. Alcohol being the only form of entertainment that people could afford or that was available to people. Back to the video. Number 4. So Tsotsi portrayed a realistic view of Africans. This may seem like a very absurd observation to make, but films created before 2005, which is the release of Tsotsi, about black people in South Africa and Africa as a whole portrayed black people stereotypically either as HIV and AIDS ridden people. For instance, I'll quote Gazlam, Beat the Drum, and the movie Yesterday. Or they were portrayed as primitives. For instance, The Gods Must Be Crazy or Mr. Bones. Or they were portrayed as foolish people. An example is the series Velaphi, Leon Schuster movies, for instance, Mama Jack, Zulu on My Stoop, and the list goes on. So, on the last part, it is important to note that during apartheid in South Africa, black people were not allowed to make realistic films for fear that black people will be inspired to want more from their lives, therefore revolt against the apartheid regime. So the only roles that were being given to black people were comedic or foolish roles where they do and say the most absurd things. So this was a tactic of dumbing down Black people and making sure that all they see on TV is Black people being jokes and foolish, and nothing to inspire anything above that or beyond that. So Black lives were reduced to comedy. This makes a film like Tsotsi groundbreaking, as Black people were portrayed in a humanistic manner where they live, breathe, comprehend, and do things like everyone else. Things like sickness, gangsterism, crime, alcohol abuse are all represented in this film as societal ills rather than a Black people thing. So for that reason, we connected, or Black people connected, with the film Tsotsi. Number 5, the story. Tsotsi takes a microscopic view of the life of the protagonist, Tsotsi. At the beginning of the movie, we can see him as a hardcore young gang leader, but as the movie progresses, we get to learn more about him and get to understand his life experiences and the abuse that made him this way. We also get to see him develop empathy after he steals a car with a baby in it, seeing a hardcore gangster find his humanity as he grapples to keep a baby alive. That was beautiful. So seeing how he wanted to protect that baby because he had no one to protect him when he was young sets a really important tone, as we tend to demonize criminals instead of seeing them as hurt individuals who allowed their own hurt to harden them and to make them ruthless. So the protagonist remains unnamed in the film. He is referred to as Tsotsi because that is the lens that society views Tsotsis, or people in gangs and participating in criminals, in. It is not until we get a glimpse of his story and humanity that the name David is introduced. So the story was a banger. Number 6, cultural and language representation. The film does not take or add anything in the story of Black people living in the township. It is accurately and realistically depicted, which is something we really found in films about, the Black communities and Black people back in the day. One of the best things about the film is that it was the first multilingual South African film. So languages such as Setswana, Zulu, Sesotho, Afrikaans, English, and even Tsotsi Dal can be heard throughout the movie. So the multilingual approach was one of the reasons why the story stuck with South Africans. It was a story that everyone could relate well with. So let's get into the awards and nominations that this banger of a movie got. Tsotsi won an Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film in 2006, and it went on to also win the Golden Globes, or the Oscars, for Best Foreign Language Films. Now let's get into the sales. So the box office sales, or the total of box office sales for this movie, were $11,537,539 US dollars in sales. So this was a good amount of money. However, I do think it could have been better, because in South Africa at the time, piracy was a huge thing, and a lot of Black people that came to know of the movie Tsotsi, myself included, we got to know of the movie because some uncle where we were staying was selling the pirated version of the movie for 10 rands or 15 rands. So that is a loss of sales to the actual, production, to the actual film production. So let's conclude this video. So Tsotsi is a South African story, and it resonated with people because it is a story we saw play out in our communities. It wasn't a story in the TV. It was a story about people we know, a life we know, and a story we see every day. And that is the reason why Tsotsi became such a groundbreaking film, and why it set the tone and the standard for South African films today. So if you've reached this part of the video, thank you so much. Please don't forget to leave a thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this, more analytical videos like this, or if you want to hear my take on hot topics. And I'll see you in the next one.